From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. We are the original podcast about consumption, and also we are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous episodes as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. His name is Sean. And Sean, how the fuck are you doing this evening?
I'm outfitting all of my vehicles in my entire house with dryer vents. That's what I've been up to.
Wait, what? Oh,
Dryer
I get
vents.
things.
Yeah.
Yes. I was like, wait, are you actually doing that? Then
I am. I don't just
I
say
forgot
this
about
shit. I
that.
do it. I'm a man of action.
Well, I believe that. I know that. Anyway, between fitting your house with whatever the fuck you're doing, did you find time to watch anything over the last couple days? I know it's been kind of a weird week for both of us.
So I got a chance to watch a really piece of shit. I'm going to play this little sound clip.
Here's a nice piece of shit.
So I ended up watching Savage Dawn. I don't know if you've ever heard of Savage Dawn before. Not Savage Beach. Not Nightmare
Savage
Beach.
Dong.
Not Savage Dong with a G on the end, but Savage Dawn.
Okay.
Like when the sun raises, right? Sun rises, dawn.
Yeah.
Dusk is when it goes down.
I feel like I have heard of this, but I'm quite positive I haven't seen it. If I have no memory of it.
It is probably one of the worst movies I've seen in a while. It's so bad.
Wow. Coming off of The Occultist, and you're saying this is one of the worst movies you've seen in a while.
Yeah, the ratings aren't bad. It gets a 5.2 on IMDb, which is a big surprise, but I thought it was a big piece of shit, and I've tried to watch it a couple times. And its big stars are Lance Henriksen. It's got George Kennedy, of course, Richard Lynch, Karen Black's in it. There's actually some people that you've heard of. Obviously, I just read a few of those. It's got I think it's the first big role of William Forsythe, and he plays a biker named Pig Iron. It's basically one of those like biker movies where the bikers come into some desert town and they fuck around with a bunch of people. And Lance Henriksen is like the tough guy. Stryker is his name. And
Is he
he
a dirt biking dickhead?
may as well be. Yeah, how the shoe is on the other foot compared to Pumpkinhead. He's the tough guy, but he doesn't want to get involved. He just lets all the shit go down, and then something bad happens to him, and then he's like, now it's on. So the description on IMDb is, a vicious biker gang is intent on destroying a small town in Arizona. A war veteran visiting an old friend and a few locals with nothing to lose go to war with the gang's ruthless leader. The whole time, people are getting raped and people are getting beat up and shit, and Henriksen Stryker's just chilling out. He looks surprisingly young in this, 1985. He's got blonde hair, which I don't think the blonde hair thing on Lance Henriksen lasted too long. How old was he at this point? Old, basically. Let's see, 1985.
I mean, has he ever looked young? I don't know that
He was only 45.
only.
I'm sure he has looked young at some point.
What year was this movie?
85.
Well,
that right?
45-year-olds in 1985 looked like they were like 70 by today's standards.
And it is entirely too long. It is an hour and 42 minutes. Just one of those like slog of a movie that you're just like, oh my God. But yeah, that's pretty much
Why am I doing this to myself?
Yes.
And why do I insist on finishing it?
right. It's like some sadistic pleasure or something that I got no pleasure from. But yeah, that's really all I got a chance to do. We just came off of showing Ninja 3 The Domination. So I'll count that in my watch thing. We showed that at Batch just yesterday at the time of this recording. So I'll include that in my watch list.
That was one of the more fun Frankenstein nights that we've had, just because the people that came out for it really got into it, and that made it a lot more fun.
Yeah, everybody was down to watch a shitty ninja movie. Shitty in the best way.
Well, that movie, I mean, I would say that movie's more than so bad it's good, but like, I think what the masses would consider so bad it's good, that's almost like the definition of that kind of movie.
Yeah, and it was a good... If you haven't heard our episode on Ninja 3, you should go back and listen. It'll be linked in the show notes, as well as Savage Dawn, not Savage Dong. So that's really all I
Savage
got.
Dawn might be a better movie.
That's really all I got a chance to watch. I watched some Jeopardy. We could talk about Jeopardy, but that probably wouldn't be very exciting.
Did that redheaded dude keep winning? I saw him the last couple days. Dorky looking ginger guy. I don't know his name.
Ken Jennings? He's the host. Oh, he doesn't have red hair.
No.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
Okay. Then either you're watching different episodes than I am, or
There's a guy with long hair.
he lost.
It's not red.
No, this guy looks like he's Ronald McDonald's sibling without the clown makeup, but all the food.
There was a redheaded guy earlier in the season, and there was kind of a heftier dude with a bad
Are
haircut.
they replaying episodes right now? Like,
No,
I've been
not
watching
now.
it on like live TV, not
Mm-mm.
on. Okay. Well, this will probably get cut out, so that's
No, I'm leaving it in because I have no idea what you're talking about, and I'm
Oh, that's good.
thoroughly entertained.
So if you happen to be the, ginger-headed dude who was on Jeopardy and won at least 3 days this week, feel free to call us out on it and tell us who you are.
Don't call me out on it. I watch Jeopardy religiously, and I have no idea who you're talking about.
Well, it's good to know.
Hey, I know what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure you do right now, but that's okay. I'll take your word for it. What have I been watching, you guys?
When have I ever been wrong?
Never.
There
That's
you go.
true. You've
John.
not been wrong.
Let's master the segue. What have you been watching this week?
Watched a handful, not as much as most weeks because it's a short week for us. I think I mentioned this a couple episodes back that all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies are on Netflix right now. So I kind of just fired up Nightmare 3. So I've really doubled down on John Saxon content this week. Yeah, there's a lot of people that will, like, I hear say that that's not one of, but it is the best Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And it's definitely one of the better ones, but having watched 1 pretty recently and then going to 3, like 3 is still a very good movie, but it's just my opinion. It just doesn't hold a candle to 1 because 2 is a whole different conversation. But after part 1, like they really kind of let the horror elements of that story kind of take a backstage to Freddy being, a comedic whatever he is in those movies. And I won't say that 3 is a far cry from the most like ridiculous of those films, but it's definitely more lighthearted than the first one, and Freddy's more bombastic than he is in the first one. And it just doesn't, I don't want to say, like I said, I do like it. It is probably like my second favorite of the franchise, but having thought myself, like I might like that better than part 1, like kind of watching them within a month of each other. Yeah, no, not even close. Like 1 is just that much better of a movie and a better concept and how it's presented. But it's good to revisit movies, I guess. That's why we did that. Have you watched that whole franchise or most of it? I know you kind of like cherry pick on bigger franchises.
Yeah, I think that I've definitely seen 1, 3.
The Wes Craven ones.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen 2. I've seen what's the Freddy's Kid or whatever. What is it called? What it's called? Say it's like Dream Child or
Dream
something.
Child. Yeah, that's the one where he has like a fetus that runs around and it's weird. I think that's also the one where they do the Wizard of Oz spoof.
I think that's pretty much all I've seen. I think I've seen part of A New Nightmare. And of course, Freddy versus Jason.
New Nightmare is pretty good too. Well, I consider that a Jason movie more than a Freddy movie.
Yeah.
But that's
I'd
a
agree.
different debate. Outside of that, that's the only movie that I watch. I did fall in a little bit of a YouTube rabbit hole on this channel that just kind of worked its way into whatever algorithm they're shoving down my throat. The channel is called Sound of History, and it's a very talky channel, but this guy goes and breaks down the origin stories of a bunch of different bands. I don't know how many videos he actually has on his channel, but I watched probably 4 or 5 of them. Like the Misfits one sticks out. I watched one on the Descendants, the Minutemen, a handful of other like bands that he's got on there. And it's cool because it's a lot of stuff that's like, oh, this is how they found each other. This is how they like found their sound. All the like the early, like a lot of times before their first album came out, like that type of information to it. What I wish he would do a little bit more is kind of once they got past their initial breaking point, like when they started getting traction, like the second half or third act of these bands runs, a lot of times it's just like for the Misfits, for example, like he went on how they got started and, their struggles with keeping band members and all that stuff. And then when they finally released Walk Among Us, their first full-length album, well, the first one that came out, not the first one they recorded, but that whatever. After that, he basically goes, and then after that, Danzig did, a couple more Misfits albums. He did Sam Hain and became Danzig, and then they did this other stuff with this Michael Graves guy. He like crams like a 25 years worth of their career into like 2 minutes of this 25-minute video. I'm like, there's part of me that's kind of okay with that because really after Danzig leaves the Misfits, like they really are a whole different band just operating under the same name, like for all intents and purposes. But you kind of skipped over a lot for someone who's trying to do like a mini documentary style like YouTube video on this band, a lot of those channels will break it up into like part 1, part 2, part 3, and that makes sense too. Like you can kind of skip over the parts that you want, but it just seems like, although I find a lot of the stuff on it interesting, I feel like he really kind of slacks once it's almost like once he gets to like 1996-ish, he's like, and this is where I lost interest, so I'm just going to cram all this shit down in the last like couple minutes. Take that for what it's worth.
That reminds me kind of like Dark Side of the Ring, with that, which I haven't talked about in a little bit. I did watch the last episode, which was about Vince McMahon and like how WWF kind of took over.
Really? Is it going to current Vince McMahon, or does it cut off somewhere?
That's very funny that you bring that up, because there's like this part, they do this a lot on their episodes, is that they really gloss over things that you want more detail on. And this one, they kind of do the same thing. They gloss over like some of the early days. They get into parts of the actual takeover piece of it a little bit more in depth, and then they really gloss. Like by the time between the time the episode was filmed and the time the episode aired, all this shit had happened, and they already had all this stuff in the can. They didn't have any time to really talk about it, so it's just words on the screen. Vince McMahon blah, in this time and yada yada. It's like,
yeah,
this is the part that's interesting to me, was Black Saturday or Black Sunday or whatever they called it, when WWF took over the airwaves from whoever had it
TNT
before,
or whatever it was.
Well, from NWA.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm talking like this is 80s, like 82 time frame. There's so much that happened before that, so much that happened way after that they just cram, like you said, they cram everything into just a couple minutes, and you're like, wait a minute, this is the part that I think is interesting, because we know the story, there's all this conjecture and all these stories about what they're actually talking about. But it's not just that. It's like every episode is pretty much like that. It's a good show, because I like to hear the background. And like you said, you'd like to hear the background of all this stuff. And maybe you don't know everything about it, but the stuff that you kind of find to be interesting,
right, you'd
want them to go into more detail, and they kind of lack on that.
I've said it before about Vince McMahon, and I'm sure we'll get it at some point, but that is the multi-part 10-hour documentary that I can't wait for, where it's like 10 episodes of like Genesis to fucking Old Testament wrath. Like, I can't wait for that docuseries to come out, whether it's on Netflix or HBO, wherever the hell it ends up. Like, ESPN would be a good place, like their whole 30 for 30 series. Like,
I think we'll probably see a Netflix multi-part limited series or something within the next 5 years.
I wouldn't be surprised if whatever happens with him once all the legal shit goes through, whether he comes out on top or not, like it just has to have one, right? But anyway, also in my YouTube rabbit hole of dumb shit, I watch. Are you familiar with the channel Binging with Babish?
It's like a cooking dude or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of him. I don't know much about him other than he's a cooking dude that cooks stuff.
He's got a good sense of humor, and a lot of times he'll do like really insane things that you find on like TV shows and try to make them in real life, things that should never exist, like milk steak, for example, from It's Always Sunny, which is like a steak that's marinated and fried in milk with jelly beans on it. It's just fucking horrible. So he subjects himself to stuff like that. But for this episode, he decided this is similar to, again, last week, he decided he was going to eat his way through 40 different packets of ramen and see how that goes. So I kind of enjoyed watching him torture himself with that. Not nearly as good as the energy drink guy, because the only thing ramen does is, at first, the salt made him feel dehydrated. And then once he started getting into like the spicy ones and the hot ones and shit like that, he just burned his taste buds, and he was like, this all tastes the same now. So I don't know why I'm still doing this, but that was fine. And then some other dumb shit on YouTube. I don't even know who this was. It just kind of auto played from one video into the next. Decided he was going to go to Red Lobster from open to close and eat their all-you-can-eat shrimp all day. He ended up eating like 207 pieces of shrimp in like a single day, and
that can't be good for you. That cannot be good for you.
I wouldn't think so, and especially considering that he said where he was. It's like a random Red Lobster in Ohio that's like between a Dick's Sporting Good and like some other. I'm like, yeah, this is gonna go well. So I was kind of hoping he would just like, explode right at the table that he was sitting at. He did not. He survived. He ate a bunch of shrimp, and I don't want him to die, but I want him to, blow chunks or something. The benefit with him is throughout the entire thing is he's kind of got videos of him sitting there, like shoving shrimp up his face. And he's kind of interjecting with like telling you like, I'm a stupid person, like over and over and over again. in so many, like he's saying it differently, but I'm like, well, at least you admit you're dumb. But past that, the only thing that I've really gotten into this week, I'm going to call him friend of the show, even though, whatever. Co-Defendants put out a new track today, which is called Counting Back from 13, which continues their style of having no style, and that seemingly every song is going to be a different genre from the last song that they put out. I don't even know exactly what you would classify this song as. Like it's not a ballad. That's not the right word, because one, there's two voices on it, but it's more, I don't know, mellow by their standards. It's not a very like raucous song at all, but it's a very good song at the same time. It sounds like they're working through, as usual, some dark shit. And I don't know, I probably listened to it like 15 times throughout the day at work, just kind of whenever I had a lull between whatever else, I just hit play on it one more time and jam through it. So yeah, that was pretty much the only thing for me outside of, watching people torture themselves eating copious amounts of shit that I stumbled into this week. So short week, nothing too crazy. Haven't had time for much shit. Might be a theme for the next couple episodes. So, what are you going to do?
Forget about it.
You got anything else you want to hit before we take a quick break and come back and cover our topic for the week?
No, let's take a break so we can lose half our audience with these back-to-back episodes here.
I don't know. I got a feeling this one might be a little bit more, I don't know. This is,
raucous?
Well, it's bringing the motherfucking ruckus, as the Wu-Tang would say.
Well, that's ruckus.
Ruckus.
Tomato.
Friggin' frack. So we're going to be back in just a minute. We're going to talk about the movie Hands of Steel. Hey guys, I just want to take a second to tell you about fellow You Run Podcast network members, the Horror Friendly Podcast. This podcast explores the horror genre one film at a time with one novice panel member and two enthusiasts. Join the Horror Friendly Podcast this month as they welcome in guests and as they celebrate a special birthday episode. So head on over to yourunpodcast.com where you can find all the previous and new Horror Friendly Podcast episodes, as well as all the other great You Run Podcast Network members. So we're back, and as mentioned, as promised, or threatened, however you want to take it, we are talking about the 1986 movie Hands of Steel, a weird Italian flick with John Saxon and some other people. We'll get into that in a second after we read our third-party review, which is from, Boofy, B-O-U-P-H-E, Boofy, is that right?
Sure. Thanks, Boofy.
So Boofy gives this movie 3 stars out of 5. And Boofy says, when you like robots and arm wrestling and John Saxon, that's it. And that's a sentence.
I thought you were going to say that's the whole review.
No.
Oh, that's too
There's
bad.
one more sentence to this. So let me start that over. When you like robots and arm wrestling and John Saxon, inspired by the Terminator, but like only the bits where you can see his insides. Also the way Paco cannot walk without looking like his legs were bolted on backwards. Again, 3 out of 5 stars. It's not a very good. Boofy might need a little grammar training because it's a very poorly constructed pair of sentences.
Needs to workshop that review, I think.
But I like that she included arm wrestling, so that's good. So, Sean, what's this movie about?
All right, so we headed over to IMDb where I typed in the words Hands of Steel, and this is the movie that came up. It is not ranked currently on any, there's no number associated with it. It does get a 5.3 on IMDb out of 10. And it says, we read the storyline and the plot. That's not what it says, but we always read the storyline and the plot. We do one of them first and never can tell which one's which. But the one on the top says, a cyborg is programmed to kill a scientist who holds the fate of mankind in his hands. He fails and hides in a diner in a desert run by a woman who likes him. The people who sent him are after him, and so is the local arm wrestling champ. And if we head down to the storyline, it says, sinister...
I gotta say, sorry. Although there's plenty of holes in the like, 3 sentences or 4 sentences that are that plot, that reads like such a more upbeat story than what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, a little bit. Storyline. Sinister industrialist Francis Turner. Oh, I'm sorry. Storyline care of Zach R. Sinister industrialist Francis Turner, played by John Saxon, creates a cyborg known as Paco Querac, played by Daniel Green, who has been programmed to terminate the leader of an ecological faction that stands in the way of the dystopian country in which the story is set. Note, it is the United States. After failing in his mission to eliminate the ecologist, Paco flees to Arizona where he must face his opponents and ultimately choose between his humanity and robotic natures.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of where we're going with this. So why don't we start with the cast on this? Because there's really only at least...
Oh, I've got to run down of the cast, John.
Okay. Kick us off then, because I only really know one name in this cast, at least fairly well. So
Is that John Saxon?
it would be John Saxon.
Okay.
You know,
Just to interject before we start with the cast, this movie, I didn't think this was a real thing, that it was available other places, but this movie is available for free with ads from Tubi and Plex. Sure as hell beats the old copy that has like Cambodian subtitles or something that I think you and I watched.
I had fun with this. I was like, I don't understand why these subtitles are here, but I'm kind of enjoying it.
All right. So we head over to the cast here, and I've got some notes. Basically, the cast, the main group of characters. Daniel Green, he's the star. He's actually been in a few things. Before this movie, he was in small one-off parts on shows, 80s shows like Mad Houston. Remember that? Dynasty, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and the A-Team. He was actually in an episode of the A-Team. He went on to be a dude that was in a 80s soap opera TV show called Falcon Crest, and eventually he would show up in Farrelly Brothers movies. He was in Me, Myself, and Irene. He was in Kingpin. He's one of those guys you've seen here and there. Again, you've probably seen him in a Farrelly Brothers movie. You probably wouldn't recognize him, but throwing that out
He's
there.
the big guy that is big in movies.
Yes.
Generally.
Yes. And now he's the aged big guy.
Yeah.
He has a lot more schlocky 80s movies that I need to see. And that's really, a great testament when you watch a movie like this and you're like, I want to see more of these guys' movies. But finding him can be tough. This was one of the rare ones that's actually streaming. George Eastman is the other big actor, I would say, that's in this quite a bit. He plays Raoul, the truck driving arm wrestler, which I always thought his name was a play on Clint Eastwood. His name's George Eastman, and he's a favorite of mine. I've seen a lot of Italian B-movie, we'll say cinema, with him in it. And we have John Saxon in a small role. Not so fun fact, Claudio Casanelli plays Peter Howell. You probably notice that he's generally a helicopter pilot in this movie. Ironically,
After this movie.
Yeah, ironically, he died during the production of this movie in a helicopter. So that's always fun.
Doesn't that have to do with why John Saxon didn't die? Because I thought I read or heard somewhere that he refused to film any of this movie within the United States because of some Screen Actors Guild contract or something. So anything with John Saxon is in, was it Italy or was it wherever the fuck it is? Not America.
Yeah, they had two helicopters or something. They were both identically painted. One was in the U.S. because this wasn't a union-made movie. And that's
Right.
what Claudio, what's-his-face, Casanelli, I think that's his name, Casanelli. Oh, what's-his-face?
Yeah, looks right.
Casanelli. That's how he died in the United States. And all the stuff with Saxon, like you said, was in Italy because it wasn't a union thing. So he didn't need to be registered as a union dude for that. So it saved his life.
Good old Screen Actors Guild saving John Saxon to be in countless Nightmare on Elm Street homages and a couple movies.
What hasn't he been in?
Other shit. I don't think he's in any Friday the 13th movies.
Interesting.
Not that come to mind anyway.
He won't be in any anymore either.
Oh, is he dead now?
I
Saxon?
believe he's dead. He has died.
I did not know that. Well, shit. So,
It didn't just happen.
all this death going on, and hey, here we go. We're going to talk about a movie with a cyborg that is... So, I went into this movie pretty uninformed. Basically, you said you wanted to talk about this movie.
I've been wanting to talk about this movie for a while.
Well, you brought it up like 2 weeks ago, and I said, all right, well, let's just go ahead and do this after The Occultist from whenever we talked about it. And the only thing I said was like, you sent me the poster, the picture, the advertisement for it. I was like, that motherfucker's got big hands. You're like, hands of steel. I'm like, all right. So that was really all I had going into this movie. My initial thought on this, and hear me out because I realize what I'm about to say, some of these movies predate this and some of them come after this, but I feel like this movie is essentially what you would get if Terminator, Mad Max, Over the Top, Blade Runner, and just a hint of The Fifth Element all had this weird orgy and spat out a weird Italian baby.
I had to actually look up when Over the Top came out to see if it came out before this, if this was inspired by Over the Top, or if Over the Top could have possibly been inspired by this, which I think it could have, actually.
It's possible. It's certainly, I mean, per our guest reviewer, whatever her name was. Arm wrestling is a fairly like significant plot device in this movie. It feels entirely like silly how they use it because, well, we're jumping around a lot here.
No, it's cool.
We'll get to arm wrestling.
Yeah, no, tell us about the arm wrestling. Tell us how it's integral, because I agree. I'm with you.
Okay. I'm going to just kind of go how we get to the arm wrestling, at least from what I can remember with it. So basically, we have Hands of Steel guy, big hand dude, Paco.
Quirac.
Who, yeah, you don't...
Totally normal name.
Absolutely. I didn't entirely realize, like, I understand you could see his arm as like a Terminator arm on the poster that I'm looking at right now, but apparently I blocked that out of my memory when I was watching this. I didn't really think of this guy anything other than a big dude until like a chunk of his arm is off. I'm like, oh, yeah, robot, cyborg, cool, whatever. Basically, this movie starts with Paco. We don't really get a ton of backstory, but he's trying to kill this like scientist dude or whatever. Doesn't really happen. I kind of got the impression like he's on the run from his, employer or whatever. Like he was.
Yeah, handlers or whatever.
Yeah, whoever told him to kill said dude. Because now they're going to kill him. So he ends up like in this desert looking town. It looks like he's in the middle of Arizona or Vegas or some shit. And he basically finds this like flop house, dirt bar / like sleazebag motel where people go to bone occasionally. That's also kind of sort of a truck stop. And he befriends chick who is
Linda.
Like the only employee. Linda, the only employee and presumptive owner of said truck stop, whorehouse, bar, whatever. He immediately starts taking his shirt off every opportunity he can and, doing chores shirtless, as you do. And eventually some ruffians show up and start acting like dirtbags. And for one reason or another, instead, like, they lead you down this path where they're like, these guys are going to fight and you're going to give this big action movie, knockdown brawl, which
standoff or something, like they're gonna face off or something.
And eventually you do, but before that, all of a sudden they're like, "You're gonna arm wrestle me, amigo," or whatever the fuck he says, and you have essentially what's this? Not Paco, the other guy, Raul. Yeah, our sort of big bad guy. I guess he's the big bad in this.
He's like the mini boss.
Yeah, well, when you look at him next to Paco in this movie, you're like, that guy's not fucking arm wrestling shit. Like, that's not. I was also half expecting like when they did this arm wrestling, like
it's gonna be like
Paco
the Fly.
Just like, well, you should just like rip his arm off
Yeah,
and like beat him
like
with
the
it
Fly.
or something. Yeah. So they build this up into this like bar fight, like ruffian shit, and it just turns into this like overly like tense, dramatic, like but bad drama arm wrestling match where Cyborg Paco just gets a boner by like letting Raul think he's going to win and then just totally, not quickly, like slowly easing him back to his side of the table or whatever. And from that point of the movie on, Raul's like got a, murder boner for Paco is essentially what happens.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think you hit it on the head. Basically, Paco is a failed assassin and the handlers are out to kill him and he's running from those people. And there's acid rain. It actually burns through the roof of his car. So it's some bad shit, right? I mean, that's acid rain at its finest.
Yeah.
And he trashes a couple cars that he gets. He stumbles into this bar. He doesn't have any money. He needs a place to stay. Linda says, "Hey, you do some chores around here. I'll let you stay here for free," or, for not for free, but you do some work.
Yeah.
And he's doing some work and he sits down at the bar. The truck drivers are there, Raul and his crew, and they're arm wrestling. Paco bumps into Raul and Raul's like, "Hey, you don't say you're sorry? Like, where are your manners, man? What's up with that, hombre?" And they get in a little brawl and he starts, he beats him in arm wrestling. He said, eases him up and over. And then they got Blanco's coming because Blanco's like the tri-state champ of arm wrestling.
Oh yeah.
And they set this thing up. It's amazing that it's like this arm wrestling match, but on each side there's a snare. And if your arm goes all the way too low, your arm gets trapped in this like rattlesnake trap.
It's supposed to be a rattlesnake until you see the act. The rattlesnakes in this movie are fucking great because they tell you like, oh, deadly venomous rattlesnakes. And they are, when they're showing the National Geographic clips of rattlesnakes, like looking like pissed off snakes. And then, when the dude's hand lands on this like snare and it's essentially like You know those snap bracelets that you used to have as a kid? I think they recalled them because they had like a metal thing like
They had
slits in
razor
kids'
blades.
wrists
They were
or
cutting
whatever.
kids' wrists.
Yeah,
Shit.
whatever. I highly doubt that actually happened, but that's the story that, everyone
That was
heard.
the urban legend around the playground.
So essentially one of those like locks this like massive dude's arm down, and all of a sudden the venomous rattlesnake is turned into like a gardener snake or something.
Well, Paco saves him too. He does like a karate chop and he saves the
Oh, yeah.
snake. He cuts the snake's head off, and that saves Blanco, which he repays him down the line. But this whole thing when Paco beats Raul, then like you said, I mean, he gets a murder boner about it. He plays a prank on him. He's dragging him behind a tow truck and all this shit. It's like, really? Just because he beat you in arm wrestling?
I love that that's a prank.
Yeah. And he beats him with a pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's what I do with all my buds. John, hey, it's I'm not going to tell
There's
you.
a reason
but-
we've never arm wrestled.
True. Yeah. Or I let you borrow a tow truck.
I didn't know you had one for me to borrow. So.
That's later.
So again, all the movies that I just said are kind of morphed together for this. Again, both predating and post-dating this movie. This movie doesn't capture like the vibe of any of those. It's very kind of cartoony at the same time. Like,
Oh, for sure.
this is very much so it's not schlocky. Like, I don't think that's the right word for this. This is very much so like when someone says like B action movie, this is kind of the ballpark that I'm thinking of, is something like this. Like, I wouldn't say that there's a strong plot in this movie.
I think there is.
Strong plot?
Yeah.
Not that there's a plot, but a strong
No,
one?
I think it's
don't know.
pretty, I mean, basically we rolled it up. He doesn't kill that dude. And he's trying to kill him. And then they're trying to kill him. And then he realizes, like, by the, spoiler for this movie that no one has probably ever watched. If you have watched this movie, seriously, drop us a line. Because we need, I don't know, we haven't talked about this, so we haven't got to the verdict yet, but I, at least, need to connect strongly with someone who has seen this movie and enjoys it as much as I do. But,
I'm
get to
on
this,
the recording with you, dude.
well, I'm saying some other third-party person, because I have a feeling that
okay.
you liked it, but again, we haven't talked about this before, so I ultimately don't know your true feelings, until we get to the end and we give it some hot dogs. But it goes into, like, as stupid as it is, it goes into like his humanity, because, the tagline of this movie, if I look at IMDb, the tagline of it is 30% human, 70% robot, 100% lethal. So we know that he's a cyborg. And he says in the movie, he's like been reconstructed because he was like a mangled mess because something happened to him. But he's like at the end of the movie, he's basically facing his humanity. I won't say what happens, but that's the ultimate thing. Like, he's got to make a decision. Is he gonna embrace his humanity or not?
We are going to spoil the end of this movie because the ending is so fucking great. But
I also like in this movie that he does this assassination attempt, right? He's like trying to kill this guy, and the guy's blind. The scientist guy, the ecologist, famous ecologist, is blind, so he never sees what Paco looks like. He doesn't know what he hit him with. And
have you seen Robin Hood Men in Tights?
Yes.
He looks a lot like Blinken from Robin Hood Men in Tights, plus like 60 pounds of like dad gut.
We tried to, the first half of this movie, or first 45, 60 minutes basically of the movie, they build the suspense on this assassin after the assassination. They don't, like, because he's blind, they don't show anything but Mosley, that's the scientist's name. They don't show anything but his face when he's hit. And that first part of the movie, all they're doing is trying to attempt to piece together what could have been the weapon of what hit him so hard to like rupture his spleen and all this stuff. And they start doing these, they start showing these scans. And I don't know if it's like the impact on his colon or something that's like imprinted on his body, but they show like
it looks like it entered his colon or something.
And it just looked like this little smushy thing. And I sent John the picture of it, and it's like these different options. It's like rifle butt,
crowbar,
ashtray, human fist, or something like that. And they're like, and they eventually come to the fact that they think it's a fist. They're like, how could someone hit someone so hard?
You're skipping over the best part of that. Like, they go back to that screenshot several times as the movie's telling its story. Like, this is cut between, like, Paco's getting dragged by a fucking tow truck, or, other shit's happening. And they cut back to this lab with these two, like, dorks that are trying to figure it out. And every time they showed this screen where they're like, it could be a crowbar, it could be a gun butt or whatever. And it just looks like a like form dong
Yeah, it looks like an old
every
piece of
time they
shit.
show. Yeah,
It's just an outline.
it's somewhere between a turd and a penis is what it looks like, until like they get 3D technology and rotate it all of a sudden. It's like, oh, there's 4 fingers and a thumb,
And
and
the hand opens up.
eureka! It's
We've
yeah.
cracked the case. Who could this have been?
They're off to the desert where they magically know where Paco is or some shit.
Well, the whole way that the breadcrumb trail of how they find Paco is just great. Because they go, the 2 dudes that are like sent by John Saxon, or I don't know, they're riding around. They find that the initial car that he had that got all burnt up by the acid rain got sold to this old dude with like no teeth that speaks perfect English, even though everybody in this movie is dubbed. It seems like nobody speaks the same language in this movie. The characters.
Why the hell would you do that?
I know. Continuity, or so you can understand what other people are saying.
Yeah, fuck that.
So then they find that they find the car gets dumped. They find this like bag that says where the car, some shit. They go into a strip club, and in the strip club are the other truckers, not Raul, but Raul's posse, who's like, yeah, can you believe he beat him into arm wrestling? He's so strong. And the 2 guys are like, wait a second. Hey, can we buy you guys beers? And you tell us, well, how strong was this guy? Where was this?
Yeah.
And that leads him to like where Paco is. So it's great detective work. I appreciate that.
I mean, it's about as good as, any other detective story. Like, I watched that movie about the Summer of Sam that had some detectives and shit. I watched that movie about, that David Fincher movie about, what's that? Fucking Zodiac.
Zodiac. I was going to say
again,
Zodiac.
Great detective work in that, but it just does not compare to
Pales in comparison.
buying some dirt bike and dickheads a couple beers in a titty bar and be like, oh, that's where we gotta go. True detective work.
I did like that when he first gets to the bar, when Paco first gets to the motel or wherever where Linda's the proprietor, and they have all the pictures on the wall, and they're like old wrestlers, or not even old wrestlers at the time. There's Hillbilly Jim, Bruno Sammartino, Magnum TA, and Terry Funk are all the old arm wrestling champions. It's like, did you guys just buy a WWF magazine and you just ripped out some of the pictures and put them like on some shitty frame?
Would you be surprised if this bar, Fleabag, Flop, whatever it is, was also a like wrestling venue when they're not filming movies about like arm wrestling going on? Because I wouldn't be shocked by it.
I could see it being a place where wrestlers stay
Yeah, that too.
overnight. The other thing, there's a scene that I really super love, and it's when Raul is talking shit and like literally talking to him. Well, not literally, but almost literally talking shit. And Paco's in the back getting some beer or whatever from the cooler, and he brings it back out, and they're like telling Linda to give him this thing, and it's a tray with a roll of toilet paper on it, and she gives it to Paco, and it's a note, and it says, if you're a man, prove it. If you're shitting your pants, use this. And it's on again, roll of toilet paper. Amazing. Perfect. My favorite.
It's right up there with when she shoves a very label out, well-placed Miller Lite can in Raul's face to try to shut him up, and he just gets, arm wrestled out of a job, or out of being the badass in the bar.
Yeah.
Since we're like spoiling this movie, because again, whatever.
I didn't spoil anything.
Well, I really like the second cyborg that shows up.
Oh, yeah. Susie.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I didn't whatever. The reason why I really like the second cyborg that shows up is this is where you get the like direct my little bit of Blade Runner and Fifth Element DNA, because she's kind of dressed somewhere between what's her face from Blade Runner and Leeloo Dallas from Fifth Element. Like she's basically wearing like a white thong and bra with like saran wrap around her randomly, which is great enough as it is. But when she goes fucking ham after like, basically they lure Linda into the room where they're pretending to bone, but they make it sound like they're, beating the shit out of her or something like that. So they lure her in there to like fuck her up to try to get Paco to come arm wrestle him or fight him or whatever. And that's fine. When Paco finally shows up to, defend her honor, the attack that Susie does is fucking hilarious because she's like flying crab monster chick all of a sudden. But what really makes it great, and again, this can't be what the movie's referencing because this is well before this comes out, but she sounds suspiciously like Eric Cartman, and I fucking love it. So like she might as well be like, hey guys,
I'm the best assassin. I'm the best cyborg ever.
And she says something like that, and it is just so, again, like did you find Trey Parker in this random bar and just like, can you voice this cyborg for a couple hours? Hey guys, I'm gonna kill this other side. Fuck you, Paco. I'm the best cyborg ever. And I know I don't sound like Eric Cartman. So
No, I thought he was in the room,
but he's not.
Oh shit!
But I that's one of my favorite moments of this movie is that the female cyborg assassin, half naked chick sounds suspiciously like Eric Cartman, which again doesn't make sense for a movie that came out in 1986. But I'm gonna go with it. And again, the other thing I kind of hinted at, but I really enjoy about this movie is this has one of the most abrupt, close-ended, like that's it type endings that I can think of in certainly any film that we've watched for this show.
Yeah, there's two things about the ending for me. Like the ending is kind of a negative for me, and it's really the only negatives I have in the movie is that it's really like the actual ending sequence is very drawn out. It's like you would think it's going to be 15 minutes, like the last 15 minutes are going to be like slap bang real quick. 1, 2, 3, we're done. But it's just drawn out. Like nothing really happens for the last 20 minutes. And you're like, okay, are we finally going to get to the end? So it draws it out so much that it makes the whole thing feel very anticlimactic. And the end screen just is almost like a slap in the face to all that because they set something up to happen. And then it just words go on the screen. One of those things where it's like a freeze frame and it says, it was a day in our near future. The era of the cyborg had begun. Like, for fuck's sake. But this is what I expect from Italian cinema, honestly.
Those Italians, they're swarthy and they know how to end a movie. No doubt about it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole ton. You said you had more notes than I did. So is there anything else that I'm missing that you want to cover before we start wrapping up?
No, I think we surprisingly talked about just about everything that I had here. I mean, the other thing that I referenced it in the very beginning of the show, air dryer vents everywhere, like clothes dryer vents, those little foamy, not foamy, but like foil looking coiled shits are everywhere. I don't know what they do, but they do something because they're every place. They must clean the air or something. And the other thing is when they're talking about Paco at the beginning of the movie, they're trying to they're kind of cluing you in that he's the cyborg that they've kind of picked this body essentially out of a crowd and did all this shit, like the breakdown. Surname, Querac. Name, Paco. Birthplace, Page, Arizona. Classified number, HS01 mission. Instructor, blah, 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 blah. Tested August 12th. Efficiency characteristics, none. That's all in the trailer, too. There's like weaknesses, weak points or some shit, which isn't actually a thing on that screen. But I think the weaknesses are like none.
Maybe his weakness is sympathy. I don't know. Too human.
And the music in this movie, it's the same two songs, but they love those like brass stabs. You're like, bam, bam.
I think honestly, that's one of my positives. When we get to hot dogs here in a second, it's going to come up again, but I think the scoring in this for this kind of movie is exactly what you want.
Yeah, I love it, but it's repetitive.
Oh, sure. But I mean, so is Halloween scoring if you think about it. So.
Yeah.
And we've been watching that for 13 fucking movies. So, well, 12. It's not in. Yeah, it is actually because they play a commercial with it on it. So anyway, not to tangent into Halloween. I don't know what time it is right now. What time is it, Sean?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
So I'm going to kick us off this week because I'm going to prime the pump and let you go apeshit on whatever you want to say about this one. So this is, again, if you like B movies and B action movies specifically, this movie is just a lot of fun. Like, it's a very digestible, very easy movie to watch in a good way. When the fights that happen in this, they're all ridiculous and over the top, but they're over the top in a very entertaining way, especially when he starts smashing heads and ripping off hands and you start seeing the real effectiveness of these dangerous world-changing weapons that are just big fucking hands in the big scheme of it. There's some pretty comical just sight gags of him supermaning around shit like that doesn't entirely make sense, but it's not something I would call perfect, but it is the kind of movie that this is, one of those pour a couple beers, have some fun, laugh at it, and just kind of watch something that's ridiculous and goes to ridiculous places. And, the cast does a good job of being just serious enough to make it feel like they're trying to tell a story, but just kind of not serious to a point where it's like they're almost in on the joke at the same time. It's a pretty fun movie. I'd give it a pretty strong 6.5. 6.5 toilet paper wrapped with notes on it, hot dogs out of 10. If you can find it, apparently Tubi has it. This is worth, pairing up with a movie like Terminator just to see the juxtaposition between the two types of killer cyborg movies. That's it. Go ahead.
That's it.
Unload.
That's all I got. So for me, Hands of Steel holds a very special place for me in my B-movie history. I've seen a lot of Italian horror and a lot of Italian knockoff action movies. This is one of my favorites to watch. I don't think anybody on this production spoke the same language. Even the good versions I've seen looks and sounds like everyone is dubbed, which I think, you said it wasn't schlock. I think it is. I think it adds to the charm of the schlock. It's got boobs, it's got explosions, got arm wrestling, a ridiculously oversized laser gun, and a guy named Paco, for Christ's sake. If you're a fan of schlock, you haven't seen Hands of Steel, I wholly recommend it. I give it 8 dryer vent hoses out of 11 hot dogs. If you have seen it, if you plan on seeing it, if this is a movie that you actually like, let us know. We need to connect with other fans. Because, the way that I find a lot of movies like this is A, looking at the silly posters and, oh, that looks really fucking stupid, but it could be great. And the other thing is, once you find one of those actors that is an unknown that's only been in this kind of shit, like Daniel Green has been in other stuff, but a lot of his 80s. I found probably 4 other Daniel Green movies just today, looking at Just Watch to see other stuff that he was in. It's not available anywhere. It's going to be hard as hell to find, but I'm going to be on the hunt for a lot of these movies just to expand my horizons on some other junk that I can watch. And I love the movie for it.
I tagged 4 other movies on my watch list just from what's being recommended on IMDb. One of them is called Raw Force. I don't know what that is, but
as we were talking about this on Just Watch, there's a movie called Thunder, which looks very stupid. And I feel like I need to watch it. And it's on Tubi. So that might be what I'm watching after we're done here. You might hear about it next time. I don't know.
See, there we go. I'm glad to hear that. So yeah, we like this movie. This is good. And for the record too, not that this needs to be said, I know Sean already knows this, but for us, 6.5 out of 10 is by no means a bad score.
No, that's a great score.
That's right in the range where most of our shit probably is. So that's pretty much it so that's it as far as that goes. As far as, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm terrible at talking. Should probably sleep at some point. Anyway, before I do that, we have a question of the week. We go to you to answer a question that sometimes is about a movie. Sometimes it's just about some dumb shit. This is kind of both. And our question of the week this week is, how do you feel about really big hands? Pretty simple. We're going to start over on Instagram, and on Instagram, our friends over at Dissect That Film said they terrify me. It's like a bear became a human. What those hands do.
What those hands do. That's a good question.
We're going to switch over to X. And on X, we asked the exact same question. And the first person who responded was our friend Pearl, who was at HissyFaceX. And she goes, "The better to choke you with, my dear," said the big bad wolf while wearing grandma's nightgown and sleepy time hat. Probably. Our friends over at Pop Culture Reflections Podcast, also on the You Run Podcast Network. Check them out. He said, "They freak me the fuck out." I exclaimed, "Goodness, what big hands you have. The better to strangle you with."
Jeez.
Responds to the big-handed freak. So apparently a lot of people think big hands is a one-way ticket to strangulation. And then our good friends over at the Krusty Boys, also on You Run Podcast Network, said they look, they look big, good, strong hands, don't they? That's all he says. And then we got one more response over on Facebook. Our friend John, who is not me, says, "I feel like big hands need really big gloves."
That was going to be my answer. Yeah. Big gloves.
That's your answer?
Big gloves. Yeah.
I feel like, actually looking at the picture I include with this, I forgot to mention, I really enjoy Paco's Casio calculator watch that is somehow affixed to a giant leather band. Like, that is the apex of do-it-yourself fashion.
It's like there are so many buckles on the leather band that this shitty Casio calculator watch are on. And he never calculates any numbers or anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't see the reason for the calculator. Like, I can see a watch. Like, I wear a watch for some reason, but yeah, the calculator watch, pretty fucking funny. My thoughts on big hands, it looks like it would hurt a lot when you get double bitch slapped by him.
Like that X formation thing that he does to knock out that first guy. He's like, whoosh.
That's one thing I should have mentioned with this movie. There are several points in this movie where I found myself laughing out loud annoyingly and loudly at some, the double bitch slap and some of the stuff like that. Just some of the things that he does just because, in retrospect, it's because he's a cyborg and he's stronger than humans. But if you look at it as he's just a big dude who's just manhandling whoever's around him, it's a very funny watch just for that.
Just to add on to that fight scene, that bar scene where he's fighting all the truckers and he's doing these really like exaggerated arm motions, that makes the cake. I takes the cake, makes the cake. I don't know what the expression is. I'm an idiot, but it's funny. I like it.
Well, and that's another one of those, again, found myself cackling on my couch like, this is so fucking great. So, big hands aside, we're going to take our normal size hands. I don't think I have big hands. Normal size hands, and we're going to go put a bow on this one. We'll be back next week with another film. Maybe we'll do a good movie again. Maybe we'll stick to schlock. I don't know yet. I do know, but I'm not going to tell you that right now. You'll have to stay tuned and find out.
That's right.
So,
you'll only know if you listen.
That's right. Or you might be able to find out if you do something really cool, like follow us on all our social media where you can interact with us. That's where we post the question of the week, and you can find all of our other shenanigans that we do throughout the week. Whatever other ongoings we have that you might or might not be interested in. We're at Dewey Pod Monster all over the place. You can also find all of our previous episodes on our site, which is crap.town, or you can go check out the You Run Podcast Network, where all of our previous episodes and all the other great shows are housed at yourunpodcast.com. Sean, I'm forgetting stuff. I'm sure I'm half awake right now because it's been a long week. What else do we need to say?
Well, if you want your answer to the question of the week answered on this show or read on this show, I don't know exactly what we do on this show, but if you want something said aloud of something that you wrote, you can reply to the question of the week. It could be relevant or not at Dewey Pod Monster on the social media. Thanks to everybody again for clicking on the polls, for giving us feedback on Spotify. If you could rate us, that'd be probably pretty cool. I don't think we've said to do that for a while. If you want to know about any of the stuff that we talk about on the show, it's in the show notes, especially any of this, what are you watching? We call it, what are you watching? Any of that stuff, it's in the show notes. There will be a link to this movie where you can watch it for free. There will be affiliate links. If you click on any of those, we'll get a couple pennies maybe after some gazillion years or so. And you can find me if you're interested in any of my craft beer stuff. You can find it at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or you can find me on social media at Draft Therapy.
If we get enough pennies, we could buy a Bazooka Joe. If they even still make Bazooka Joe, I don't.
We could probably buy the old ones that they didn't sell that'll shatter our teeth.
I remember the ones from back in the day. Those shattered my teeth anyway, so what's the difference? So anyway, big hands, chewing bubble gum. We'll see you next week.
God damn!
You lose, American asshole.
Hands of Steel.
That's staying in, right?
No.
No.
Right.
Huh?